Hello. This is This Week in Amplio. I can't say anything. Amplio. You would think I could be able to pronounce words by this time. Hello. This Week in Amplio, I am Ryan Erickson. And who else would be with me? Take a wild guess. It is Al Shelley. Hi, Al.
Hey there.
All right. Well, I must apologize for my mush-mouthedness as we started up here. So I apologize. So how are you doing? What's happening with you? Where would you like to go today? And we have a topic, but yeah.
Well, that could have been to the audience. So definitely answer all those questions in the chat. I can't see them directly, but Ryan will let me know. Yeah, this has been an exciting week for me because for some reason, something that's actually driven me for, since I formed Net Objectives in '99, I brought to the forefront, and it's what's called the technology gap. And so that's one thing I've been talking a lot about this week. And what I really like is it provides a positive way to show how we have to overcome certain disempowering beliefs and move forward. So I really like this better framing, but it also lets people know what's possible, which I think in some ways Agile's gotten a little stagnated on what they think is possible. And the other thing is Tom Gilbin, and hopefully he's here. We'll have him as a guest in about a half an hour when we get through these first things, or a little less.
Yes, sir.
Great. Tom and I came up with something I really think is amazing about a year ago, and I've never. Oh, great. Yeah, happy to have Tom. You can be in the whole time. That's great. But I'm really glad you're here for the Penta. So he and I came up with something we call the Penta, which is just totally demolishes the iron triangle and provides a great way to look at things. So in some sense, this week isn't like new ideas, but bringing things I've had around, one for 25 years and one, I don't know, we did the pen about a year or two ago. But I think I have a way to talk about it now. So I'm glad to have Tom here. So when we do talk about it, he's there. But knowing Tom, he's going to interject his thoughts while I talk. Oh yeah, you are guilty, man. Guilty. No, I don't believe it's possible for him not to. But this is all a compliment because he has made me so much better with his demand that I speak what's accurate. I admit it's irritating at times, but I always get past that because I always know he's correct about that. He can speak. So, Tom, why don't you give yourself just a minute or two? Don't go into a long description, but just a minute or two introduction to yourself, or do you want me to?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, Tom has been called the grandfather of Agile sometimes because he influenced a lot of the Agilists who were, involved in the Agile Manifesto, but his work goes back literally decades. I've learned a huge amount from him and his processor. I don't know what to call it, a process, a thinking way called Evo. And Competitive Engineering was the book that I read that got me introduced to him. And then we're really good friends now. We've been talking, 3-4 years, at least once a week. And he shifted my thinking quite a lot, especially about one of the topics I inject a lot, which is value first. Understand the critical to value second. Well, to identify the critical stakeholders, success criteria, and constraints. See, he's already active here. But anyway, he's somebody to be listened to and is a gem that hasn't been discovered by many people. I consider him and Don Reinertsen really the two top living thought leaders. I mean, I'd put Ellie Goldratt up there if he was still alive. Anyway, so those are the kind of two topics. We'll talk about the technology gap to begin with, and then we'll go into Penta. And then we'll have Q&A. But while we talk about these two things, I want it to be more interactive. We don't need to hold the questions and answers to the end. So with that, you want me to go into the technology gap and what it is?
Absolutely, Al.
Okay,
make it happen. You also wanted to share here, I think, to give a graphic.
Let me share my screen. This is a nice visual I have, and I think sharing the screen makes it easier. Let's see. For some reason, I'm so used to share.
This would be the place where, Al, I should have asked you to give me all the screens so I could share them and let you pay attention to them. So note to self that I will do that.
Okay, well, I get I get Chrome window. Here it is. Screen 2 finally showed up. Here we go. Okay, so let me give a 2-minute background on what this thing is, and then I'll talk to you about how I use it. This was a term coined by Paul Pilzer in his book Unlimited Wealth. And his belief, his philosophy, what he was saying is that there's stuff we know, stuff that's been manifested, and then what's possible, and that there's a gap. So we can see what's manifested is kind of here. And by this, I mean how people aren't really doing, I don't know if you want to call it agile. Agile is a particular method, but how well are people creating business value with the resources, the capabilities they have versus what's actually happening? And I'm not talking about what's possible, like, if we just did Scrum or SafeWell or something like that, but I mean like what's possible with all the stuff we know. And the difference between what's manifested and what could happen if we did it all is huge, and it's getting bigger. And the reason he calls it a technology gap and why it's important to recognize this is he starts out talking years ago, wealth was equal to the amount of resources we have. When I mean years ago, centuries. I'm a king. I got this much land. I have these many people. I have this many resources. That's my wealth. But when technology came out, wealth was equal to resources times some factor of technology. And as technology has increased, and in the information age, something new happened. One of my business mentors mentioned this. See, when you buy and sell goods, you may give me money, and now I have money, but I no longer have the good. But if I give you information, you have it and I have it. So there's a multiplicative effect. So Pilzer talks about that wealth is equal to resources times technology to some power. It's growing exponentially. And the difference, my opinion, is most companies operate at about 10 or 15% of the capacity of value created that they could. I'm not going to get into that, but I do think it's pretty low. So closing the gap would literally mean trillions and trillions, hundreds of trillions of dollars. So this is a tangible thing to me. And this was one of the things I did at Net Objectives. And one of the reasons I started Success Engineering is closing the gap. So I want to talk about a few minutes and you should ask questions and make comments and see how you relate to this. The question then becomes not so much, what should I follow? What should I do? It becomes more, how do I close this gap? How do I make things better and not get stuck on any particular way? Although we have lots of things to use. So I'll pause there for questions, or for Ryan or Tom, for you to make comments about it.
So one thing we talk about is kind of that the idea of the technology adoption curve as well, in combination with the technology gap.
Yeah.
And I think to summarize, just for my limited brain here, is about when you're talking about methods that are the adjacent possible, right? That if we bring those methods into the present, that allows the conceptual knowledge of what we might be able to do.
Yeah, you're nailing
aspirational.
So there are at least 3 pieces here. One piece is what you mentioned, the technology learning curve. How quickly can we learn these things? The other one is obviously, what are these things? Okay, that was like top line, like theory of constraints, lean, flow, Evo, language. Those are Tom's things. Those last 2. So as new stuff comes up, you say you're maybe raising that bar. But then the question is, so new things come up, raise the bar. But then the question is, how do you move up? That's the technology learning curve. There's another question, which is, what holds us back? And I think this, in other words, do we have disempowering beliefs that actually limits and makes the learning curve harder? So it's, how do we learn? How do we shut off things that are holding us back? And what is there to learn is a way to think about this, or a way to think about this. I'm open for others.
And this is what do, again, those of we as consultant practitioners, guides to what we're saying, coaches, for lack of a better term, that what are we teaching as coaches that allows value to be created in this current present, and that is, I don't know, maximizing the value. I mean, my gosh, that's a meme from long ago. But again, you're saying that this is that, assuming that the ways that were outlined in the manifesto and those that kind of are around that are can be, again, there's limiting beliefs that say we can only do what's within those constraints, and that we must accept those constraints, as opposed to what you're saying. Again, I keep going to the might be possible. So is it a practitioner capability that you're talking about, the ability to guide or guide better in what the current practice is, or is it something else?
Well, you're bringing up a few points. One is, it really, the top line is based on what's happening. Rather what's possible. The bottom line is based on what's happening. So we want to raise the bottom line. So that's at the practitioner level. But then again, the question is, how do you raise that? And then that's a coaching, consulting, or even the practitioner. Why can't they help themselves? There's no reason they're not understanding this themselves. So you have to pay attention now in the technology curve. You start realizing, wait a moment, it's not as simple as saying this is stuff they have to learn. You have to attend to how people learn. And people kind of tend to ignore this. See, people in general view that we see, well, it's actually worse than that. There's this view that there's a reality out there, which is wrong, and then that we see it, which is wrong. And that the way we see it is right and everybody else is wrong, which is also wrong. Now, I don't need to get into the philosophy of it, does a reality out there exist or not, but the people who are pretty sure one doesn't exist are the string theorists of physics. I think that's the hootest thing, is that when you really get down to physics, they say it's really all energy and we create a reality, whatever. So I don't need to go there. That could be interesting. But what we should notice is that whether it's out there or not, our reality is constructed in the way we look out there and see things, and that we have a construct, you might say, in how we view the world, and that we think the way we talk about things is the way it is. And we have this voice in our head that's always talking. And by the way, if you wonder what voice I'm talking about, it's the voice that's saying, I wonder what voice he's talking about. That's the voice. Yeah. And this is the problem, is that we don't really listen to what the other person is saying. We listen to the voice that reactivates to what they're saying. It's very hard to shut that thing up and get past that. And what that voice does is we have a model. So they say something and we try to fit what they're saying into the model. Like you might just now have said, gee, I wonder if that's true. That's what you're doing. This is a normal process. We all do this. One of the reasons I talked to Tom is he's got a really, I think, very powerful, useful model. And when I talk to him with my model, he looks at it very objectively. He's actually pretty precise with it. So he kind of shows the flaws in my thinking because, see, I don't see them, because to me, I'm really smart and I got it. And this is how it all works. But you know,
I'm trying to unmute Tom to have him challenge you on this.
No, he knows he does this. And it's one of the reasons I like talking to him. I think it's the thing we always have to do, is we have to set ourselves in a situation where people we trust and people we respect, always, that we can put them in a situation, we put ourselves in a situation to hear this. Because the biggest problem, I think, in the agile space right now is we think so many things are true that aren't true. Like we think empiricism is enough when we need a model, a theory of how to do things. We think complexity holds us back. No, we can use first principles to see what to do and unobscure what complexity is obscuring. We think being purposely incomplete is okay. No, we want to focus on getting the right information at the right time to the right people. We think it's okay for a product owner to tell a team what to do where they're just figuring it out themselves. No, we need to find the critical stakeholders, what their success criteria is, what their values are. And we need to have that be driven across the board. And there's so many things that hold us back because we think, oh, well, people can't understand this, so they got to follow till they understand instead of better training people. So that's what I want to look at, is what I am looking at. You know, it's yeah, and I like that. It's latent wealth until realized. We focus too much on parts of our workflow instead of the whole thing. You know, I might have covered all I meant to, so I'm good with just putting this out there. You know, I put some things on the left that were up there, but if you're interested, I'll give Ryan a, you know, these are some things that are missing. I put this, these were present at the time of the manifesto. These are things that were present as well. It's funny, Wolfram Mueller, who I really respect, and if you don't know of him, you should check him out, Blue Dolphin. He said, what's next after Agile? And my response is, what was before Agile, but isn't recognized? I need to add Evo here. Apologies, Tom. Should put Evo and language up here. I know, bad. Sorry, my mistake. But there's a lot of stuff that we're still exploring. You know, like here's another one. I just noticed this one. This is the GPS. This is something part of Amplio. Diagnose your organization before you try to do something. Yeah, we put frameworks in like that. So I'm good with this. This is the thought process I put out. This is my focus is on how do we go from here to here. And I want to point out something. When I said we're at operating, most companies are operating at 10 or 15%. It is possible to operate much, much, much higher, as the book, How Big Things Get Done, which is an awesome book. And you could ask Tom questions. So why don't you put, you know, we'll have ways to, Tom loves to chat with people. So, you know, you could, I'm speaking for him a little bit, but I think that's true. So, you know, you can always ask questions of him as well. But to me, this is a place to be coming from. So I don't know if there are questions people have. I can answer them now, or we can move to the.
We can move to the next. Tom put some in our private chat. Tom put some references here. I'm putting them out in the comments. Also, going to try and keep the banners coming so we can keep that on the screen when that supports the topic we're in right now. So nothing yet, but those of you on LinkedIn, those of you who are watching on YouTube or wherever else, we are open to having you A, comment, and B, potentially come in here and dance with us on these topics and go.
Yeah, here's I just put in a URL that you should share. This is a resource page of some like very small percentage of what he's done. He's amazingly prolific, but it has things. It also has a book Tom has written on the Penta, which is what we're going to talk about next. So you just go to that page, search for PENTA, and you'll find it. You download a copy. Okay, so no questions. We're all good.
Not so far. I will put them up as soon as they come up.
Okay, then what I want to do, but that's not what I want to do. What I want to do is I'm going to put something else up. Now, Tom, you haven't even seen these slides, but I think you'll like them. But you will let me know if you don't. That I'm sure of. Okay, why don't you let me share the screen here?
All right, pop that up here.
Okay,
there you go.
So let me explain this presentation. So at first, this looks a little like what, just to give Tom a little background on this, because I showed him some of the slides I'd built before. One of the things I love about the ACES program, actually, it's Amplio University. There's the full track of Amplio is Amplio University is what I call the Amplio Consultant Educators Program. These are really good consultants who are getting better, and we talk. I guess we have like 5 sessions a week now. 4 sessions of information. One is the Amplio Community of Practice, which you can join for free. In fact, I'll put that in the chat as well. You can go here. This joins for free. So Tuesday mornings, I have these. And we actually talked about the Penta, and the recordings are up on the website. But anyway, Wednesday, the topic was kind of getting better, and we went over the Penta. And actually, I last week we talked about it, but I was too abstract. So they said, no, Al, we need a step-by-step way to get there. So I'll warn you, Tom's book on this is awesome, but it kind of gives you the end result in some sense. So I think it's brilliant, but it's sometimes a little hard to get through. So I wrote this kind of step by step to get to the concept of it. Follow up with his book, though, then it'll be really clear. It might be really clear without this, actually, because I thought it was clear, but some people were a little confused. So anyway, this was an interesting observation. So I presented what I thought was really a nice presentation, and we talked about it. And what happened was the order in which I presented it wasn't a good one. And this is a big thing for me. Just give a little background. I've been training for a fair amount of time for 27 years. And 97 is when I kind of got into training with design patterns and things. And one thing I discovered was that when I'm trying to get somebody to some place, like to be, they're not expert now, but they want to be expert. What's the difference between where they are and where they want to be? And I realized it's a set of distinctions. Like, what do they look at? And what do they not look at? Because experts ignore certain things because it gets in their way. Was they also look at things. So I'm just going to call those distinctions. And I got this idea that the way you teach to go from here to here, say, is you don't talk about this, but rather step by step by step by step by step by step by step to get there. And that order, I call the pickup sticks model of curriculum. In other words, what's the top pickup six? You ever pile pickup six? One on top, you can take off because they already almost know it. It's like latent or implicit knowledge. So what I look at is how do you go from here to there? And what I noticed when I didn't notice this at all, actually. I was beat over the head with it. I wasn't really beat over the head, but what was pointed out was that the order I went through was biased by the point I wanted to make. So what we talked about is what would be a better way. And then I changed the presentation to that. So this is an interesting thing about teaching. Sometimes the way we want to teach it is not the way they need to hear it. So it's always good to do something a few times. Anyway, here's what we got. So we got the Penta. So you can interrupt with questions. I've got the chat here. I can't see them directly, but Ryan, if anybody has something that you want to explain, that's good. Okay. So first of all, let me talk about what the iron triangle is. Okay. And this was the gist of the start of the conversation, because I've always hated the iron triangle. I've always felt it was just wrong and very limiting. But it's the idea of scope, budget, schedule. You're constrained with those. You can't modify, you can't work with them, and that quality usually goes down. And the reason I disliked it from the beginning is I had studied Toyota and Lean in the 80s, actually. It wasn't called Lean then. We were studying Toyota directly. And I knew that, in fact, the whole idea of Lean is that if I improve quality, these other three things get better because they get more efficient. So I knew the iron triangle was wrong. Quality can be a driver of things. The whole total quality movement. It's not really free because you got to do something, but that idea. But then somebody asked in the ACE program, where did it come from in the first place? So they pointed out that there was a common phrase: there's cost, quality, and time. Pick two. If you have a job, so that's with scope fix. You're going into a place, hey, I need this done. So this set up the idea that if you fix scope, budget, and schedule, quality must go down, which I just think is wrong. So this is the fallacy. Iron triangle has this constraint idea on us that these things are fixed, that we can't do them, that quality is at the effect. It's really arbitrary, and it's not accurate. And we all act as if it's real, and we limit our thinking as if it's real when it isn't. And this is what I mean by disempowering belief.
I think that this also, when I think about that, this is the whole, you don't believe what you see what you believe.
That's right. That's perfect. Yeah. Edgar Schein talks about that. We don't think and talk about what we see what we think and talk about. So if we're thinking and talking about this, then that's what we see, and we don't see a way out. And the Penta is a way out of this. Okay. And Tom, you should feel free to jump in at any time. I know you've not seen all of this. Okay.
I can't unmute Tom without his permission. So I can ask all I want, but
well, I'm just saying, jump in when you want to.
Yes.
Jump in.
Say hello, Tom.
Hello, Tom.
Tom. I thought you'd get that.
Okay. So it's interesting to note that Agile inverts the iron triangle, but all that does is use the wrong thing in a better way. Agile inverts it by saying, okay, we're going to have a schedule and we have a budget. That's the resources, the costs of the team we have. And we're going to have scope, see what we can do in there. But we still have the implications. We still have the disempowering belief. We're just working better in the wrong set of way of thinking.
Well, I think one thing I guess I would challenge there is that what you're talking about, that's not really, it's not articulated in the 4 values and 12 principles. They're talking about that what is the common thought patterns that arose
That's right.
from practices that were initiated from the manifesto and that document.
Well, that's a good point.
I think some have criticized that, you're conflating Agile and Scrum, because Scrum talks about this and that, but that's not in the manifesto. Lay off the manifesto, man.
So let me say 2 things here. First of all, Scrum and Agile are different. I mean, I've been the one who's saying that more than anything else. So it may look like I'm inflating, but let me explain 2 things here. So one thing, the manifesto doesn't explicitly state this, but the whole value and the whole way iterations are done, increments are done, is this. In other words, I set the time, I have my team, time is schedule, team is budget, and I see how much scope I can put in there. So whether they say it or not, it's in there. The whole idea of an increment is flipping this around. And they never break the iron triangle. But you're right. The iron triangle is never stated in Agile. So if you've never believed it, great. So I'm not saying this is a problem. I should say Scrum's inversion, I guess, of the iron triangle. That would be more accurate. Except this is kind of, I think, how most Agilists think about it. See, this is an issue. And this is one of the reasons I suggest systems thinking isn't in Agile. Okay, you can bring it there. You can bring it to it. But the fact is, when you do systems thinking, you have to attend, how are people going to interact with this thing? And when you don't make things explicit, and this is where Tom's really amazing with his language model, you have to make things explicit so they're understandable. You have to recognize Bertrand Russell's comment, the problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Yes.
And the irony of a manifesto that says face-to-face communication is the best way of doing it, and then is defined by a written document that we're not talking about, but is immutable in and of itself, is a contradiction and hypocrisy in and of itself. It just occurred to me how silly that is. So whether I should say Agile there or Scrum there, here's the second piece. What I suggest Agile is how it's perceived in the marketplace. That's a different way to think about it. No, that's not what it should be, maybe, but we have to attend to that. I was going to write up something why Amplio, my approach, doesn't have immutability in it. Why? Because as a systems thinker, I know if people look at it and they mess it up, I had something to do with that.
Yeah.
I didn't explain it as well. Now, I'm not to blame. They're not to blame. It's just what happens. Systems work both ways. So anyway,
I think maybe one way to help, for me to clarify that, the iron triangle is something that was articulated and that was put in the PMBOK, and that the PMI includes as the body of knowledge, just to say choose to, right? And that
you look on LinkedIn and you look at all the complaints about estimation, and you look at all of the complaints about I'm locked into things, and behind all that is a belief that this is there. And that's why I say this is an Agile construct. And a fabulous book, I'm going to say it again, How Big Things Get Done, is an amazing book because it shatters this. It just totally shatters this model. And it's just a joy book to read, and it'll make you think.
And who's the author? I'm going to put it on the screen.
I can never remember his name. Flyberg or something.
Sorry, it's Bent. There are 2 authors, but the major one is Bent, B-E-N-T, and then Flyvbjerg in Danish, F-L-Y-V-B-J-E-R-G.
Yeah, brilliant book, and it's fun to read. It's anecdotal. He tells stories, and he talks about the good and the bad, and what goes right and what goes wrong, and why. And everything he says is true, I think, but not everything aligns with our casual thinking at first. I say casual thinking at first because at first when he says things, it seems to violate some things, but the more you think about it, it lines up. Yeah, Tom.
Yeah, I've got some favorite parts of his book too. One, he has a database of 16,000 projects of all kinds, including IT, in Oxford. And he has analyzed the projects. We're almost back to the Iron Triangle now. He's analyzed the projects, that how many were completed on time, under budget, and delivered the benefits that were promised. And long story short, he finds that 99.5% of the 16,000 failed on at least one of those criteria. They cost too much, they were late, they did not deliver the benefits. In other words, 0.5% of 16,000 projects delivered the benefits promised on time, under budget. And then he analyzes who were they, what did they do? And the long story short is they were extremely disciplined and professional about going into the project, taking their time to do great engineering or architecture or experiments or something before they dived in and maybe screwed things up. Okay? In other words, there's an argument for one thing we need is probably far more discipline. I call that engineering. And people, programmers of the world, start running away when I say engineering. But maybe engineering is our only hope to not fail. There's a thing called software engineering, which is old. We shouldn't really be running so fast from it. That's it.
Well, again, I'll until Al gets back, I want to come in and say that there's a critical how can you engineer something that hasn't been designed appropriately? How can you engineer something that hasn't been designed with this idea of what are the requirements? What are the scope of each system? What are the needs of each of these points? So once that gets discovered through a process, a dialogic process, or however you say that, then we have a context from within to engineer according to a schedule, a set of principles. So I come from the artistic background. So the idea of a design problem being an artistic challenge that you engage with a customer base and the unpredictability of certain actors. And then once you've gotten to a point where this can be known, this is known, that as in the system of actors, we've identified those things. And now we can embark upon the task of engineering. That's my understanding. And then, so how do you incorporate that idea of what is the design and engineering? How do those integrate together?
Okay. Well, words like architecture and engineering, everybody has a different definition. There's no standard we can point to. So what I do is I make my own definitions in my books.
Okay. All
And
right.
I say, when I say architecture, I mean that definition. When I say engineering, I mean that. And you don't have to love it, but you have to recognize that when you hear that word, that's what I mean. And I will grant you the same privilege. You say, Tom, I want to define architecture and engineering totally differently, and here's my definition. That's fine. But there are three stages you're alluding to, and one is let's call it requirements for the moment, or top level requirements, the major reasons for anything to change. Okay, I often talk about the top 10 critical requirements, something like that. Okay, then now from that we can move into, and I'm doing this very quickly and roughly, let's call it architecture. Very roughly, how are we going to solve this problem? Are we going to do it in software or hardware? We're going to use the old system or build a new system. That, big high level decisions. Okay. And at some point after architecture, the specialists will wander in and they will do the engineering. So they could be doing usability engineering, performance engineering, reliability engineering, technical debt re-engineering. Okay, so we could view engineering as a more now. Architecture and engineering are essentially the same process, but at different levels of abstraction.
Right. Certainly. And I think that's important to do as well. Again, I don't want to interrupt for too long. I think this is even an issue with how is Agile going to happen here in this organization? And what often doesn't happen, and this is something I encountered from talks with Dan Mezek, was about that before we do this thing, right, whatever this adoption or how is Agile going to happen here in this transformation? This is what I mean by Agile, and have that agreement of the language, the common language, the design language. What do I mean by Scrum? What do I mean by Kanban? So that you get this shared pool of understanding. Yes.
Yeah. So this is good background for this. I'll give you a minute. I want to point something out. Then Tom, you could add, and then I'll continue on. One of the things you said, Tom, that I think is really critical is the word discipline. So in the Agile space, what happened, XP, like I've been around it before there was an Agile manifesto. There were a group of us on the XP programming group. That's where kind of we were chatting. This was Scrum existed in 95, but nothing really in Agile had happened a lot until 99 when XP kind of came out, and we were chatting about things to do. And the problem with XP, I love XP. There's no problem with XP per se, except that most people don't want to do paired programming and they don't want to do test first. And the fact that it works is irrelevant. They don't want to do it. And Agile created the idea that self-organizing means you could do what you want. And that's not what they meant it to mean. That's what the principles and the practices are. But
people inferred that from those principles because it's not explicit.
Well, people actually, I think, inferred that from Scrum talking so much about self-organization, but yeah, somewhat from the Agile space. And when you're not precise and you don't have things and you're not explicit about it the way Tom was talking about, this shit happens. And you can complain about that it happens, but that's like complaining you can't fly without an airplane except in one direction.
This gravity stuff sucks. I don't want to follow those rules of gravity.
Totally. So what we need is to look at what that is, and that's what design and architecture. Yeah, Tom, you've been very patient.
Okay, I just want to pick up on something that Ryan said and something, the elephant in the room. And okay, so the elephant in the room is called Agile. Okay, now I take a fairly extreme position. By the way, I love good Agile, real Agile. I love Agile as it should be. Look at my Evo book. It's all about Agile. Okay. Now, so don't misunderstand what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it. Agile is at best a tool to help us do something better. Now, what's that something? Well, Al said the magic words a little bit earlier when I gave the V sign. This is Churchill's V sign for victory, but it's also a V sign for value. Okay. I believe if we ask ourselves, why do we do any project at all, ever? That the answer is to improve stakeholder values. You look at any project, you will find related to it a set of stakeholders that have some values that they're not being satisfied with, and that project is started and has as a primary purpose delivered. Now, let's imagine for the moment that some values can be delivered without Agile, or at least without Scrum. We were delivering values before Scrum was coined, like
in software
years ago.
In software,
that too, absolutely. Okay, so okay. So if I could deliver more value by not using Agile, then I choose to deliver more value by not using Agile or not using a particular form of it. Okay, so
heresy, Tom. Tom, that's heresy.
I'm trying to be a heretic here. Now, if I can deliver value up to a point without Agile, and using Agile helps me deliver more value more quickly, then Agile as a tool is justified. but only then. That was what I was going to say.
Okay, good. Well,
Value first. We summarize that as value first. So I
Yeah.
can do that and that. And I just created a new meme. Value first.
Yeah, I like that. So let's take what we just said to go through this, because it requires some of these issues, maybe all these issues that have been brought up, design, architecture, and mostly discipline and being well defined. So regardless of who flipped it, this is basically the idea of a sprint or an iteration, which is I have this amount of time. How much scope can I get into this? So whether it's explicitly stated or not, they're flipping the iron triangle. So I'm going to go back. So the first thing, and this was what started the creation, the idea when I was talking to Tom, I said, I'm really irritated with this because I know if you let quality drive, cost goes down. And therefore, you can get more done in less time. This is a common thread in Lean. Lean is primarily about education, but it's about how to get quality up so cost goes down by focusing on that. So this is the first step to recognize. So I pull quality out. Quality is not quality does not have to be impacted by these three. Quality can drive these three. So that's the first step. Attending to the qualities. This is where Tom corrects me. Instead of quality, it really should be qualities because there are many qualities. So I need to fix where I say quality. I need to change that to qualities. Yes.
Top signaling five qualities. Yes.
You want to mention the 5 quickly?
Actually, I have a new symbol. This is not a symbol for 5. It could
Okay.
be. It's a symbol for multiplicity, not one quality, but many, not one
that's
cost,
right.
but many, not one timing idea, but many. And that's a big deal. We have to get used to the idea of multiplicities, even though it is inconvenient and costs work.
And uncomfortable at times,
Yeah,
because it
yeah.
means it's harder to understand with multiple. See, if I say quality, I've been vague intentionally. I don't have to think about it.
Because I can come back to there's a quality that means meeting a specification within a standard, right? So what are the quality metrics that are being offered here? Then there's also the aesthetic quality of something.
Yeah.
How beautiful is something? What feeling does that evoke? And that's an aesthetic thing that is, along with, those of us random carbon units.
Yeah, Tom.
Okay, so first, we've been using the term value and quality. So I'd like to make one statement that values are anything the stakeholder wants, and that could be a cost reduction, which we wouldn't call a quality. But a great many of those things that stakeholders want, we would classify as quality. It's making things better. Okay, so in very simple terms, this set of all qualities is a subset of what we call values, but they're a dominant subset and they're a critical subset. So often we just simply use the terms interchangeably. Okay, now in 1976, I wrote a book called Software Metrics. Probably buy an old used copy if you want to. And I defined how to quantify about 50 different qualities like security, maintainability, reliability, usability, and on and on and on. Okay. So what we discover about quality, there's not a finite set. Even if we take what Ryan said, the quality of beauty or something like that. If you ask an artificial intelligence, and I've done it today, to give me 50 scales of measure for the beauty of something, it'll do it. If you ask for 500, it'll do it. There are very many measures or ideas of beauty if you think about it. Okay. Mm-hmm. And this is generally true about any quality. I was fooling about with the happiness metric, and the artificial intelligence system, which was Perplexity, when I asked it, can you give me 10,000 or 100,000 different definitions of or measures of happiness, it said, nope, I can only do 1,250. I said, why?
I could only do 8.
Yeah.
I was going to say I could only do 8 billion.
The answer, the answer's kind of fun. He said, because I'm not trained on more. So the number of variations of any idea, like reliability, usability, beauty, is potentially very large numbers, theoretically infinite. Okay. Anyway, doesn't matter, because real life, we've got to focus on the critical few things.
That's right.
And that's why I start any project and say, what are the top 10 most critical things? And if you can do those, boy, you're better than almost anybody in the 16,000 project database from Bent, Fleabjord. Okay.
Yeah.
So because they hardly attain even one of these in practice by the deadline, by the budget. So if you could do all 10, you're fantastic. And then when you've done all 10, you can say, oh, I have a little bit of budget left. I'll do number 11. I'll do number 12. Okay. You just simply go to the lower priority values and you work on them, or you get more budget and you do so. Okay. Yeah. So there's probably in real, Deming put it very nicely, when the plan, do, study, act cycle stops is when you are no longer in competition.
Yeah. I want to, Tom, I'm going to use your new meme, value first, because a lot of people say, well, you don't really know what qualities are, but notice he keeps pulling this back to the critical stakeholders, their success criteria and constraints. Why don't you share the screen again? Let me, okay. So what we have then is scope. When we talk about scope, we keep mentioning values. We really can't talk about scope if we're not talking about values, because they're not interchangeable. They're not the same thing, but they interact with each other considerably. Okay. So scope is maybe the success criteria, but within the context of the value. So I split that out and say, okay, now we have a new kind of thing here. I should have qualities underneath here too. I don't know how that dropped, but just presume it's there. So budget also is another way to talk about resources. Like we have this amount of money, or these number of people. And I hate to pump people into this, but I mean, all this is all a categorization of what capabilities do we have, what abilities do we have, what money do we have, what equipment do we have, or whatever. So we have to recognize that we're now at this level. Okay. And I'm talking a little abstractly, but this is where I explained it before, design, because to me, the fact that design was missing was what really irritated me. But it's easier to see at this point that we need to attend to design. In other words, how do we design to achieve our scope can be quite different. I was talking to Tom the other day, and it was a really good insight you kind of put on me. It's something I knew, but I didn't know I knew, kind of thing. Was I talked to him out in the past, I was kind of one of these 10X programmers. And he said, well, it's not that you program fast. And I said, it's that I designed in a way that I had less work to do. And I don't mean that I over designed and before. See, this is the thing. People think like being simple is taking shit away. Excuse my language. It can very often be just looking at how can you implement something so that there's less work to do in the first place. That's value first. Oh, I love this. Value first. By the way, for you non-Brits, this is quite different than this. So be careful. Be careful. Tom laughs because he knows what the difference is. But value first. I'll tell you, if you want to know where the other one comes from, look at the Battle of Agincourt, the British and French battle with the archers, and the fact that they're archers and what they did to archers when they lost might give you a clue. But anyway, so design can make it so there's less work to do, but still get the same scope and the same values. In fact, it might increase values because you have less to maintain. And sometimes it's the ability to design. I consider that part of programming, part of building things. So that's why we have to inject design into this, and design affects everything. Okay. And we talk about schedule, but see, schedule is a funny thing too, because how fast you work, how efficient you are. This is, by the way, something interesting I learned from Tom, because I'd always thought effectiveness was if you were kind of doing the right thing, and efficiency was, kind of how much, work or affect how well you were doing that. But in fact, efficiency, if you're doing the wrong thing and you're not getting value, you're zero efficiency. Efficiency is a measure of how much value you're getting at the rate you're working. Yeah, and you can look it up in the dictionary. In fact, that's what I started doing. I said, oh my goodness, Tom's right on this. It's if you're doing the wrong thing really fast, you're zero efficient. It's not how well you're doing what you're doing, it's how well you're creating value. So we look
I think that needs that, and like what Tom's saying, I think that needs definition too. If you're going to put forth a metric about what is our efficiency metric, it's that X over Y equals,
well, it's simply this: it's value over time, or is that it's value over time? And if you're not creating any value, you're not being efficient. And if you look in, you actually get different definitions in dictionaries, but I looked at 3 or 4 and the consensus was it's how much value, how much you're producing. If you're producing crap, you're not producing anything. Now, when you start thinking about it this way, it shifts. See, a lot of this is a lot of mind shift stuff. But so Tom and I use the word efficiency here to mean this. Now, you might notice how this has slowly been looking a little bit more like this as we go. Okay. This is the step-by-step. Okay. Now, design obviously affects all the other quints. Okay. So we need to attend to that. And efficiency affects all of the things as well. So finally, what we come to is this. Now, and then there's the question, how does Penta deal with risk? But I'm not going to go there here. That was just a question my aces asked me to do. Now, I want to do one more thing, and then I'm done with this presentation. But here's what I want to do. I want you to look at these pictures, because this is a very important concept. If you're a coach, if you're a consultant, if you're a trainer, and you know that people need to get here and they're here, then the question is, how do you do it? Well, first of all, telling people isn't a good way for several reasons. First of all, remember, they're going to filter what you tell them into their way of thinking, and what you're trying to do is change their way of thinking. So that's not going to work. Plus, they resist because they're adults. You're an adult. They don't want you to be smarter than them, even if they brought you in and are paying you for it. That's just the way humans are. So you can lead with questions, knowing you're going from here to there, but there's this path. And it's not always the right path. Like I did wrong. I did design. I led with design when I should have led with values. But here's the point. You go a step at a time, a step at a time, a step at a time, where each step is a small, gettable jump, something they already almost know, or something they tacitly know, but it hasn't been brought to their consciousness. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to talk. I'm just going to go step by step. Look at the pictures. Look at how I laid this out. Look at how I laid this out, where each change is small. But in the end, we've gone from the iron triangle to here. This is a coaching, training, consulting tip. I find this to be a very effective method because I didn't have a lot of time here, but if I was, as we teach this, like in the ACE program, what we do is we ask questions and you see how to get from one place to the next. We look at what do they know. And what happened when I did it the other way, when I threw design in early, it confused some people. So we looked at why did it confuse some people? It's confused people because design interacts with all of these. So if I throw this in too early, I lose this. So you got to do it in the right order to make it more accessible. Okay. So comments by Ryan, Tom, questions.
I think that
what I wanted to do.
The design actor in there, I think, is also a big complaint about Scrum, and I think about the whole the practices that came from the manifesto are the discipline of product management. That kind of that view of how is quality defined, what are the definitions, and of what is this project for, who is it for, what is it for, why does that matter? And I think those questions typically, and again, I would be curious to see what you bring in from Reinertsen on that, but that discipline, that way of thinking, that is missing from what has emerged from the manifesto.
Well, I love Don's work, and he does talk about this, but he talks more, I think, about what you have to attend to achieve it than the actual product development part himself. But what he talks about also is how you have to get this agreement on what value is, and the cost of delay. So, and I actually shouldn't say what he says. I should say what I got from his book, because I know he goes into places, and I'm sure he says a lot of stuff he doesn't say in that book. But it's very consistent with the value first, because you can efficiently create stuff that's not value. There's no value to that. And he talks about that by value is what, so the cost of delay is how long it takes us to get the value that we're achieving. So it's inherent in his work. I'm going to have to go back and look. That's a great question. I'm going to go back and look, because if he said it, I missed a lot of it. He may have said it. I missed some, which is normal, because you only can hear what you're ready to hear. By the way, are there any questions from the peanut gallery out there?
The peanut gallery that Occam's razor came up from Victor and
Okay.
Crowell. And I exactly forget what we were talking about when that came in. I was paying attention to that. But again, this is maybe around the idea that the solution is the simplest one. Practitioners, coaches, guides are making things much more complicated.
Let me say two things here. First of all, what we want is not a simple way of, we don't want a simple system. We want a simple way of using the system. And those are different. The Model T is a lot simpler than a Tesla, but a Tesla is a lot easier to drive. So the fact that people are going after simple frameworks is a mistake. Also, Occam's razor is not the simplest thing. It's the fewest number of assumptions to explain it.
Okay.
And that's a big distinction between, you go read it and look at it. Because I always heard it as the simplest thing. I realize that's not my understanding. It's the fewest number of assumptions. So you could say that's simple because it's not all this convoluted logic underneath it. Yeah, and look it up in the dictionary. I'll look it up too on mine, because I remember seeing that. And it makes a lot more sense that way. Because the simplest solution would be, oh, that happened. Teacher, I don't have my homework because an alien came in and stole it. Well, that's real simple. But that has a lot of assumptions, like that aliens exist, that they would care about my homework, So this is an important distinction. Let me actually explain this. This is an important distinction. And I'm going to talk about something I do in Amplio a lot. So Scrum is nice because it's simple. It gives you a quick framework to start with, and you go forward and you say, well, that's great. But then the problem is you're stuck with it. You're stuck with this simple. When you might want something simple to start, but then you might, as you learn new things, you might want to be able to change it. Maybe being immutable doesn't make it simpler. It makes it more complicated. Because when you start, maybe you want to use sprints, because the sprints are great accommodation. They set up an easy way to think about, I'm going to work for a week or 2 weeks or whatever, and then I'm going to reset it, and it's very simple. But after a while, you realize, but wait a moment, reality is a lot more complicated than this, and we want to get feedback faster, and maybe we want to do one-day time boxing, and maybe we don't want to go through all the machinery of that's laid out, and maybe we want to work, and this is something, by the way, Tom has, I should put this on my website, where I read Tom Gelb resources, Musk's methods. Now, whether you like Musk or not is irrelevant. It's what he does is really amazing. His work methods are really, really amazing, and I think exemplify this. And what you have there, then, the idea of Amplio is that you have this. I've identified by literally 10,000 conversations. I figured it out over about 15 years, from about 2000, 2001, when I started going to conferences a lot, to around 2017. And I talked to practitioners, consultants, coaches, found what worked, what didn't work. And I've come up with like 50 capabilities pretty much that an organization needs, and 30 capabilities that teams need. And then the question is, well, that's a lot. It's not as many as thousands of possible solutions, but there's a way to do a diagnosis and then come up with a starting set of capabilities, a starting set of practices. And some people say, well, that's a framework. I said, well, the whole thing isn't a framework, but it may give you a set. And that's simple. So you can start simply by being fit for purpose if you have a coach that knows how to guide teams to do this and works with the team. So the system is complex, but the using of it, once that's said, is actually fairly simple.
Well, and again, I think
great,
my idea of what complexity is versus this other thing, I think. Tom, did you want to hop in here before I riffed on
talk
something?
about Musk's methods. That'd be great.
Okay. Here, statement. Musk is the greatest agilist on the planet in practice.
Ooh.
Full stop. He does it properly, and his industrial results prove that he's done it properly. There's no theory there. Okay.
Yeah.
So, the other thing is, if you at the start of my book, I picked out something you'll easily find on the internet too. Musk stated orally, never in writing, his 5 principles. Okay, so he's cooked it down to 5 principles. I'll just take the first one. Assume that the requirements are wrong, even if an extremely intelligent person, he's alluding to himself without saying it, gave them to you. And by the way, same thing with design suggestions. Assume they're wrong, even if Elon says. Very interesting start here in life.
Okay. Well, we're at time. So no other comments or anything. We could go over a few minutes if there are.
We had a couple minutes. The Victor Anthony Crowell again came when we were talking about simplicity. Had a couple comments in there. I think what you're saying about I think it's coming in contrariness to you there. And there's a follow-on.
Oh no, that's not in contrary to me. Starting. He's not contrary to me at all. He's exactly saying what I'm saying.
Okay, so I
go back to the comment. Yeah, so let me specify that. Let me go back. See, getting to simplicity is not necessarily removing steps. This is not just in the work process. This is also in designing software. Like if you go with value first and here's what's valuable and you figure out what can I release first of this, then I build toward that instead of having this big epic that then I have to remove stuff from. So building in stages is the essence of what Agile is, but most people don't do that because they're stuck with stories and epics. It's just historically been built up wrong. Anyway, and Tony, if you disagree with me, say I'm wrong in your interpretation, but I totally agree with what you just said there. I think it's totally consistent.
And Tony had another follow on there.
Yeah, you start with fewer, but which few do you do? This is consistent with discipline, Agiles, work your way of working. So we don't think and talk about what we see, what we think and talk about. So Amplio has this set of things to look at so you can think and talk about it, and then pick just a few of them that's actually needed. It's a diagnostic system and includes a diagnosis in it as well. Anyway.
And again, Tom giving us some
I've written a lot about that actually.
Yeah, and this is what language are we speaking? If and who are we? And do I want what you want? Is what we're trying to do the same? And again, this is all and some people can say that's pedantic or what have you, but it is so important that in order for me to understand you, the two of us need to be speaking the same language. And again, the three of us need to say, what does simplicity mean? Because I was going to go back to this idea of that you're talking about not being able to, that some folks are okay with simplicity or whatever. And I think that the clarity a human system and the number of people have around the process that they're executing, that familiarity increases with time. They have more information. They gather data based on what they're executing. And then with that information, I'm going to use that information better and better and better. I know more. I can see more. And then one develops a level of mastery about that information. So what was once inscrutable, then that with more practice, more information, then you understand more, you can see better, you know better, and then you continue that along if there are these, again, if you have initially a simple process or a 14-page book that kind of lays everything out, the better I get with that, the more inconsistencies I may see with it. And as I master that shuhari thing, so if I approach that with the simplest set of artifacts, rules, roles, events, then now I have more information.
I want
And
to.
then I can execute that better. Again, you see the systems thinking, you see lean, you see value streams, and then that becomes more effectiveness there. So
I want to tack two things on what you said about speak the same language. He's obviously not talking about like we both speak English. He means that the words we say mean the same. And this is what I meant, that we aren't really talking to each other. I'm saying things to you, and what happens in your brain automatically, so most people don't even notice it's happening. I say words that evoke something in your brain, and some of the words you interpret the way I meant them, and some of the words you don't interpret the way I meant them, and you don't notice which ones are which. You think you know what I said. This is again why he said the problem with communication is it looks like it's actually happened when in fact it happens, because I said one thing, you heard something else. This is why back and forth communication is so important, because we can see that. This is why asking questions is good about where people are. So what we need to do is recognize this. And I'm going to throw something in here because this is one of the, I talked about in the technology gap. Disempowering beliefs hold us down. But the other thing is we have incredibly disempowering way of training. Most courses, I'm not saying all training is bad. I did not mean to say that. If you have a trainer coming in and you're going to like actually work on something, like learn how to code, and there's a lot of lab, or learn how to build requirements, and there's a lot of interaction, and you're actually doing something, that's good stuff. But most of this ongoing adult training we do in the Agile space, where we have a 2-day certification course, and then we come back
or 5
for another one. What?
Or 5. I mean,
or 5. That's even worse.
Yeah, because you're just.
The point is that what you need is a way to actually learn something, try it, see what didn't work, and then say, oh my goodness, this isn't working. What do I do? And then go to somebody who can help you. This is like a mentoring cycle that's needed, and is something that is we don't do in most of our training, because you learn something, you go then to try it in your work, and then what happens is you try it out, the workshop's over, and you don't have here. Let's show the screen if you can. Oh, I gotta say to Shar, sorry. I want to contrast these two learning methods, and this is the other thing that's holding us back in my mind, is that press the wrong button. Present, share screen. There we go. Okay, so share that. See, this is the model I espouse. You learn something, a day later, you try it out. A few days later, you get some results. And then guess what? You can go to somebody and talk to them. This is the way Amplio training is designed, Amplio University. This is holding us back. We learn something, we try it out, we get the results, and now we're outside of our workshop. We got to pay for consulting. This is why training is ineffective for ongoing training, not all training. Again, I want to be clear. This is the ongoing training model. This is how I'm trying to increase the effectiveness. And by doing it in a couple hours or a few hours every week and ongoing, I can support lots of people. So my view is drive the cost down with a virtual every now and then few hours, 1 hour here, 1 hour here, 1 hour here during the week, drives the cost down, and you're more effective because you're not doing this, you're going here. Anyway, I've said more than my piece. So any other questions, any comments from you two? And I guess we're good. And thanks for hanging in there.
Yeah, we're 9 minutes past, and I'm trying to get this comment off the screen because for me, Tom, based on what we've done here, is there anything you wanted to say about what has happened in this session that you've not yet had a chance to say?
Yes, but I don't want to use the time, so let's do it another time.
Yeah, I loved having Tom here. Let's see how many times we can bring him in, because I think probably most of the time a lot of his work is reflected in the Amplio system. He's had a big impact on me.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. Well, Tom, thank you for coming in here. Thank you for playing with us and giving us the context and additional information around the Penta and everything that we talked about today. And those of you out there, and if you're seeing this in whatever now it is, not September 27th, 2024, if it is in 2028 or something like that, please put a comment in there. Send Al a message, send Tom a message, send me a message. We'll be very happy to get back with you and engage in your thoughts and thought process. So with that, thank you for the gift of your time and attention, and we shall see you later.